The night the police sealed the house, I understood something I wish I'd never learned. This mansion wasn't left to me as a gift. It was left to me as a confession. Red and blue lights washed over the marble walls, turning wealth into something cold and clinical. Evidence markers dotted the floor like punctuation marks in a sentence that had waited decades to be finished. Lawyers whispered. A detective spoke into his radio. Someone asked if I needed water. I didn't answer. I was staring at the watch in my hand. Heavy. Old. Gold dulled by time. Its engraving almost worn away, as if the same fingers had traced it again and again, trying to remember something they were afraid to say out loud. "Miss Carter," the detective said carefully, like every word carried weight. "If you keep going through those documents, whatever you find will change how you see your family. There's no undoing that." I nodded. I already knew. Because an hour earlier I had learned that the man who left me this house, the man everyone insisted was just a family acquaintance, had been dead for 20 years. And yet his presence was everywhere. His books, his handwriting, his clothes still hanging in the closet, and the watch. The same watch I had seen in exactly one childhood memory, on my mother's wrist, late at night, when she thought I was asleep. I closed my fingers around it as the house creaked softly, like it was breathing for the first time in years. But to understand how I ended up here, standing in a dead man's home, holding his watch, while the truth circled closer, I have to go back. Back to the day the will was read. Back to the moment my father's hands started shaking. Back to the lie my family had been living inside my entire life. Before the house, before the will, before the watch burned a hole in my palm, my life looked ordinary in a way that felt earned. I was 32, financially independent, emotionally cautious. The kind of woman people described as grounded, which was a polite way of saying I didn't ask many questions. I had learned early that questions made my family uncomfortable. My father, Daniel Carter, was still very much alive then. Respected, soft-spoken. A man who built his reputation on patience and quiet endurance. He loved routines, morning walks, evenings with the news turned low. He never raised his voice, never slammed doors. He believed stability was a virtue. My mother, Helen, was the opposite. Elegant, precise. She curated her life the way some women curated museums. Nothing out of place, nothing accidental. She had a smile that knew when to appear and when to vanish. I spent most of my childhood trying to earn it. As a family, we were functional, no scandals, no shouting matches, no dramatic holidays ruined by wine and secrets. If there was tension, it lived in pauses, in glances that lasted half a second too long, in conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Alexander Hale fit neatly into that silence. That was his name. I didn't grow up calling him that. To me, he was Mr. Hale, a friend of the family, an old associate from my father's earlier business days. He appeared once or twice a year, always unannounced, always impeccably dressed. He brought books instead of toys. Asked questions no one else thought to ask. How old are you now? What are you reading? What do you want to understand? My mother always stiffened when he was around. My father grew quieter, but no one ever told me to stay away from him, and no one ever encouraged me to get close. When I was 20, Alexander disappeared from our lives completely. No explanation, no farewell. My parents said he had moved abroad, that people drifted apart. That was life. I accepted it because accepting was what I was good at. Years later, when the lawyer contacted me about the will, I almost didn't return the call. Why would I? I barely knew the man. I had no claim, no expectation. The house, they said, had been left to me specifically. Not to my parents, not to any foundation. To me. That was the first crack in the story I'd been told my whole life. At the time, I didn't realize it wasn't a gift, it was a correction. The will was read in a room designed to make people feel small. Polished wood, frosted glass, diplomas aligned with surgical precision. The kind of office where secrets were handled quietly and permanently. My parents sat beside me, close enough that I could feel my mother's perfume, clean, controlled, familiar. The lawyer cleared his throat. Alexander Hale passed away 20 years ago, he said. However, certain provisions of his estate were sealed until specific conditions were met. My father's hand tightened around his cane. That alone should have warned me. He didn't need it anymore. He just liked having something to hold. The primary asset, the lawyer continued, sliding a folder across the table, is the Hale property, the residence on Blackwood Hill. He paused. It has been left in its entirety to Miss Carter. The silence that followed was not shock, it was recognition. My mother inhaled sharply, then froze, like she'd realized breathing might give her away. My father didn't look at me. He stared at the table, jaw set, eyes hollowing out from the inside. I don't understand, I said. There must be a mistake. The lawyer shook his head. The documents are explicit. Mr. Hale anticipated confusion. He left instructions that the house was to be transferred only after your 30th birthday, and only if you were living independently. Living independently, not married, not under my parents' roof, not controlled. My mother found her voice first. Why would he do this? The lawyer met her eyes without blinking. He described it as a moral obligation. That word landed like a fracture. Obligation. Not affection, not charity, debt. I looked at my father then, really looked. His hands were trembling now, subtle but undeniable. He caught my gaze for half a second before looking away. We should discuss this privately, he said. But it was already too late. Because the lawyer reached into the folder and removed one final item, placing it gently in front of me. A watch. Old, heavy, gold dulled by time. I was instructed to give you this, he said. Mr. Hale wrote that you would recognize it when the time was right. My mother stood up so abruptly, her chair scraped against the floor. No, she said, too fast, too sharp. That's not necessary. But my fingers were already closing around it, and in that instant something shifted. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, because I didn't just recognize the watch. I remembered it. And I knew, with a clarity that made my stomach drop, that this inheritance wasn't about a house. It was about something my parents had buried, and something Alexander Hale had died for. I didn't tell my parents when I decided to see the house. I told myself it was logistical, paperwork, an inspection. Something I could get done quietly, efficiently, without turning it into a family event. The truth was simpler. I didn't want witnesses when the past finally looked back at me. The mansion sat at the end of a narrow, winding road, hidden behind iron gates that opened as if they'd been waiting. Blackwood Hill overlooked the city, high enough to feel detached from it, close enough to observe without being seen. Power likes distance. Secrets like elevation. Inside, everything was preserved, not abandoned, not decaying, preserved. Furniture covered, but not dusty. Books arranged, but clearly used. A glass of crystal on the desk, as if someone might return to it any moment. It felt less like a house and more like a paused conversation. I walked room to room, slowly, aware of my own breathing. In the study, I found files. Not legal ones. Personal. Notes in a familiar handwriting I'd never seen before but somehow recognized. Observations, dates, names. Mine appeared more than once. Bright, quiet, watching everything. Ask her questions. She notices patterns. She deserves the truth, but not yet. My chest tightened. In the bedroom closet, I found suits still hanging, shoes lined carefully beneath, and in the top drawer of the nightstand, an indentation where the watch clearly belonged. Empty now. The house knew it was missing something. Then I found the photographs. Most were ordinary. Landscapes, buildings. A younger version of Alexander standing beside people I didn't recognize. Until one photo made my hands go cold. My mother. Younger, unposed, laughing in a way I had never seen her laugh. Her hand rested on Alexander's wrist, on the watch. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, pulse roaring in my ears. This wasn't an affair frozen in memory. This was intimacy, routine, familiarity built over years. My phone buzzed, a message from my father. "Where are you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I noticed something else in the photo's corner, a reflection in a mirror behind them. A man standing farther back, partially obscured, watching. I zoomed in. It was my father, younger, rigid, his expression unreadable even then. The next page in the album was missing, torn out. And for the first time, the question stopped being, why was I given this house? It became something far more dangerous. What happened here? That someone needed erased? I didn't confront my parents right away. That was my first mistake. Instead, I started with the paper trail. Utility bills dated long after Alexander's supposed death. Property taxes paid anonymously. A private security contract renewed every 5 years, always by proxy. Someone had been protecting this house long after the man who owned it was gone. When I called the firm listed on the contract, the line went quiet. "That account was closed years ago," the man said carefully. "After the incident." "What incident?" A pause. Too long. "I'm not authorized to discuss that." I hung up and felt the house settle around me, like it had been listening. That night my mother called. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You didn't tell us you were going to the property." I didn't think I needed permission. Silence stretched thin between us. "You found some old things," she said finally. Not a question. "Yes." Another pause. Then softer, "Some memories are better left alone." That was when I realized she wasn't afraid of what I'd found. She was afraid of what I might connect. The next day, my father showed up unannounced. He stood in the doorway of the study, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the room like a man visiting a crime scene he'd already rehearsed in his mind. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Is the house dangerous?" He hesitated. "Just a fraction. Enough. It carries history." "So do we," I said. "You never warned me about this one." He sighed, the sound of a man tired of holding something heavy. "Alexander was complicated." "So was your marriage." That landed harder than I expected. His eyes hardened. "Be careful." "With what?" "With narratives," he said. "People like to rewrite the past once the witnesses are gone." I thought of the torn photograph, the missing page. "Are all the witnesses gone?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Don't do this," he said quietly. "Don't turn this into something it doesn't need to be." Something snapped then. Not anger, clarity. "You're not trying to protect me," I said. "You're trying to contain me." He stepped closer. "I'm trying to keep this family intact." "By lying?" "By killing the truth," he almost said. I saw it flicker behind his eyes. That night, I found the hidden drawer, behind a false panel in the desk. Inside, a police report marked "Unresolved," stamped and restamped until the ink bled through. A death reclassified twice. Cause amended. Time of death adjusted. And one sentence underlined in red. Person of interest, Daniel Carter. My father. Alive, present, untouched. The house wasn't accusing him, it was waiting for me to. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the desk until dawn, the police report open in front of me, rereading the same lines until the words stopped looking real. Person of interest, unresolved. No further action required. The language of avoidance disguised as procedure. At sunrise, my mother arrived. She didn't knock. She never knocked anymore. She walked into the study, took one look at the papers spread across the desk, and closed the door behind her with deliberate care. The click of the lock sounded final. "You weren't supposed to find that," she said. "Not you misunderstood. Not that isn't what it looks like. Just, you weren't supposed to find that." "Did he do it?" I asked. She sat down slowly, smoothing her coat like this was a meeting she had prepared for. "Your father loved you. That's not an answer." Her eyes finally met mine. For the first time, I saw something unpolished there, not guilt, calculation. "Alexander was going to change things," she said. "He was tired of hiding. He wanted to tell you the truth about who he was, about who you were." My chest tightened. "And you?" "I wanted the family to survive." The words landed with terrifying calm. "Daniel found out," she continued. "Not all of it, just enough. Enough to know he had been replaced. He confronted Alexander, voices were raised, threats made." "You're describing motive," I said. "I'm describing inevitability," she replied. "Men like your father don't explode, they erase." I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You're telling me this now because... what? You want absolution?" "No," she said quietly. "Because Daniel is losing control." She reached into her bag and placed something on the desk. A key. He kept the house untouched because it reminded him what he'd buried. But now that it's yours, he's afraid. Afraid of me? Afraid of what you'll choose to see. That was the moment I understood the shift. My mother wasn't warning me about my father. She was choosing a side, and it wasn't his. Outside, I heard gravel crunch, a car pulling into the drive. My father had arrived, and this time he wasn't pretending to be a witness. My father didn't raise his voice when he came inside. That was always his advantage. He closed the door behind him, looked at my mother once, really looked, and then at the desk, the open file, the watch resting between us like a verdict. "I see," he said quietly. No denial, no outrage, just acceptance sharpened into something dangerous. "You shouldn't have told her," he said to my mother. She didn't flinch. "You shouldn't have done it." The air between them tightened, dense with years that suddenly had names. I stepped back instinctively, my spine brushing the edge of the desk. The house felt smaller now, like it was leaning in. "I did what was necessary," my father said. "Alexander was destabilizing everything. He wanted to rewrite the past." "He wanted to tell the truth," my mother replied. My father's gaze finally shifted to me. It was the same look he'd used when I was a child and broke something expensive, disappointment, carefully dressed as concern. "You don't understand context," he said. "You see fragments and call them reality." "You killed him," I said. The word didn't echo, it didn't need to. He exhaled slowly. I stopped him. My hands curled into fists. "You killed my real father." Something flickered across his face then, not remorse, loss. "He was never your father," he said. "I was the one who stayed. I raised you. I protected you. By lying, by preserving stability." The watch slipped from my fingers and hit the desk with a dull, final sound. "He left me this house," I said. "Not to expose you, to expose this." I gestured around us. The walls, the silence, the rot beneath the polish. My father stepped closer, too close. "You walk away now," he said softly, "and this ends. The house will be sold. The past will remain where it belongs. You'll still have a family." I met his eyes. "And if I don't?" His jaw tightened. "Then you become a problem Alexander never learned to solve." That was the moment the last illusion collapsed. I wasn't confronting my father. I was standing in front of the man who had decided, once before, that murder was cleaner than truth. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that he would do it again. I didn't leave the house that night. Not because I felt brave, because leaving would have meant admitting he still controlled the exits. My father left first. He didn't threaten me again. He didn't need to. The warning had already been delivered, calmly, efficiently, the way he did everything that mattered. When his car disappeared down the drive, the silence that followed felt deliberate, staged, like an intermission. My mother stayed behind. She moved through the house as if it were suddenly fragile, touching door frames, smoothing the backs of chairs. For years, she had avoided this place. Now she wandered it like a woman revisiting a memory she wasn't sure she'd survived. "He won't act immediately," she said quietly. "That's not his way." "So, I have time?" I asked. She shook her head. "You have uncertainty. That's worse." I spent the night in the study. I read everything Alexander had left behind. Journals written in fragments, dates without explanations, observations about my father that stopped abruptly, as if the writer had realized too late how dangerous clarity could be. One page stood out. "If anything happens to me, it will not look like violence." Daniel believes order excuses everything. No accusation, no confession. Just foresight. Near dawn, I heard movement downstairs, not footsteps, drawers. A door opening where there shouldn't have been one. I froze. The house wasn't empty. I followed the sound to a room I hadn't noticed before, a narrow space behind the library shelves. Inside, a safe, left open in a hurry. Empty. Whatever had been there, someone had taken it. When I checked my phone, I saw 3 missed calls, all from the same number, blocked, private, persistent, and a single message, finally delivered. You don't actually know what happened. You only know what he wanted you to find. I stared at the screen, my pulse climbing, because the message wasn't from my father, and it wasn't from my mother, which meant one thing was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. There was another witness, and they had been silent for 20 years, until now. The message stayed on my screen long after the phone went dark. You don't actually know what happened. I read it again and again, letting the words rearrange everything I thought I understood. Another witness meant another version of the night Alexander died. Another angle, another lie still breathing. The call came just before midnight. A distorted voice, filtered, careful. "You found the watch," it said, not a question. "Yes." A pause, then, "He wore it the night he died, but he didn't bring it with him." My grip tightened. "Then how did it end up here?" "Because someone else was there before your father." The floor beneath me felt suddenly unstable. "He didn't go to confront Alexander," the voice continued. "He went to retrieve something, proof. Something your mother begged Alexander not to keep." My mind raced, the safe, the missing contents. "What was it?" I asked. Silence. Then a recording. The word hit harder than any accusation. "Your father arrived after," the voice said. "Angry, controlled, certain, but by then the damage was already done. Alexander had made his decision." "To do what?" "To tell you." The call cut abruptly. I stood there shaking, surrounded by the dead man's walls, realizing the truth wasn't singular. It was layered, weaponized, passed from hand to hand until it no longer resembled itself. I went back to the watch, turned it over, pressed my thumb against the worn engraving, tracing it the way Alexander must have. And then I felt it, the faint resistance beneath the metal. A hidden latch. The watch opened with a soft click. Inside, a microdrive. My breath caught. Before I could react, headlights flooded the windows. A car on the drive. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My father had come back, and this time he wasn't here to talk. My father didn't force the door. He never did. I heard him inside the house before I saw him, the familiar rhythm of his steps, measured, unhurried. The walk of a man who believed the outcome had already been decided. I stood in the study, the watch open in my hand, the microdrive resting in my palm like something alive. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said, appearing in the doorway. "You shouldn't have come back," I replied. His eyes dropped to the watch. For the first time that night, his control slipped. "You don't know what that is," he said. "I know exactly what it is," I said. "It's what you were afraid of." He stepped closer. Alexander liked insurance. He liked to feel important. He thought secrets made him powerful. And you thought silence made you innocent. He stopped. The truth, when it finally landed, didn't come from the recording. It came from his face. "I didn't plan to kill him," he said quietly. "I planned to end it, the affair, the threat, the chaos." "But you did kill him." "Yes," he said. "Because when I arrived, he told me you already knew." My breath caught. "He lied," my father continued. "But I couldn't take the risk. Not with everything at stake, not with you." "With me?" I whispered. "I raised you," he said. "I wasn't going to lose you to a dead man's confession." That was the paradox. He didn't kill Alexander out of hatred. He killed him out of possession. I looked down at the microdrive. "There's a recording," I said. "Isn't there?" He nodded once. "Your mother's voice. His voice. Dates. Truths that don't fade. And you let me inherit this house knowing it was here." "I thought you'd sell it," he said. "I underestimated you." I slid the microdrive into the laptop. The room filled with sound. A younger version of my mother pleading. Alexander calm, resolved. A final sentence spoken with unbearable clarity. "She deserves to know who she is, even if it costs me everything." My father closed his eyes. When the recording ended, the house felt lighter, like it had finally exhaled. I called the police myself, not out of revenge, out of precision. By morning, the story was complete. Alexander Hale was my biological father. The house was his apology. The watch was his key. My mother lost the life she curated. My father lost the stability he worshipped. And I lost the illusion that love is always gentle. The mansion is mine now, not as a reward, as a reminder. Because the most dangerous people aren't the ones who rage. They're the ones who decide, calmly, that truth is optional.